Hey, welcome to O'Brien Builds. I'm Gregory O'Brien, and this is what I'm working on. In this video, I'm going to be focusing on my drawer fronts, door fronts, kind of the exterior finishing of my cabinets. But before I do that, I'm going to give a quick rundown of the internal structure of my cabinets, how I built them and why. And then also, too, I'll just give brief descriptions of the components I'm working with, so the drawer slides as well as the hinges and how that affected my design. All right, so here we are in the van. Um, just gonna run through before before we get to the exterior. The part you're gonna see, the part that looks nice. Just gonna run through the internal components. So what we've got here, this is the original framing. Um, I threw this together in someone's garage like over a weekend. Um, and I had nothing in the van at that point. So I was just trying to get something put together. Didn't really have a solid idea of what those internal components look like or where I wanted doors and drawers and all of that. So put that together. It's more or less square, more or less level. As good as I could make it, but working with those materials, I mean, there's obviously going to be problems. Uh, so I put that together, and then the system that I built out from that is where I'm able to do all of my adjustments so that I'm actually able to use soft close slides, because they can be pretty finicky if you don't have if they aren't square and level with each other and all of that. So I'm able to do all of those adjustments after the fact, and get things tweaked just right because of that flexibility. So I've got my framing off the front, and as you can see, it leaves a lip on the front, which would be an issue if you were trying to just mount your slides in there. So that's why I came in and I added these vertical pieces in here to match the depth of what my exterior framing was going to be. Now, on the slides, again, I wanted to have flexibility, so I went with um, I spaced all of these the same depth apart, and then I mounted my slides to an additional piece of wood here so that I could come in here and add drawer slides wherever I wanted to. Or I could add like a pantry style drawer behind doors, or sliding shelves, anything like that. Or I could make the whole thing, a stack of drawer boxes. And at the same time, I can put adjustable shelves in here. I'm probably going to put maybe 2, 3 shelves in this area. Um, One other thing on this design, well, it's worth mentioning, the soft close slides I'm working with are 16 inches deep. The cabinet is 17, so this piece of wood is a little bit longer than the slide. So one of the benefits of having it mounted on this piece of wood is I'm able to run this piece here all the way in the back of the cabinet. Now the benefit to that is I added a lip on there, because I wanted to close off. I want to be able to put a piece of plywood in the back of my cabinet. I've got wires. I'm eventually going to have piping, things like that back there. So I wanted to be able to close off the back of the cabinet, but still have easy access to it. So the way this works is I'll put my piece of Luan in the back, and then either my adjustable shelves are going to pin it in place, or these guys here, the back of that piece of wood will pin that back plate in place. So it's very simple to access behind the cabinet. All you have to do is either pop your drawers out or take the adjustable shelves out, and you can pull that panel off. So as far as the components I'm using on the soft close slides, what makes them so finicky is this whole assembly back here is the soft close assembly. So you can see this peg right here. If you pull that out, there are 2 springs here, which put this front assembly under tension. And then on your drawer slide, This peg here is what catches that part and sets the assembly when you pull the drawer out. And when it slides back in, it's going to hit the peg right here and pull it in softly for the last couple of inches. Now, if there's anything off, that can cause problems. So by having this system be able to move out this way and also a little bit of variation like this, it allows this assembly to find the best path in. It's not, it's not just screwed into the side of the vertical. There's a little bit of movement, so if it's off a little bit, it can move and find whatever the easiest path inward is for the drawer. As far as my hinges, these are the only hinges I could find that weren't like the typical setup where you have to countersink the hinge into the door. Because my doors and my drawers are only 3/8 of an inch thick at the edge and only 1/4 inch thick in the middle. I don't have room for that, so I found these. They're just surface mounted. They aren't soft close, and they don't have any kind of adjustment on them. Usually there would be screws on here where you could tweak the door after you set it in place. These just have those mounting holes, which gives you a little bit of movement, but at the end of the day, you kind of have to eyeball it. As with all of the framing throughout the van, I'm making it out of dimensional lumber ripped down on a table saw and then sanded with like a hand sander. So the reason why that flexibility for the slides is so important is because no matter how square and perfect I make that framing, it's going to shift. It's going to dry out. There's tension in the wood. There's going to be variation with sanding, and even just once it's in the van itself, there's going to be varying humidity. There's going to be movement from just driving around in the van, varying temperatures. So it's going to move. So I'd rather have flexibility and be able to adapt to those changes down the road, and just have that built into part of my system as opposed to trying to mill out perfectly even pieces of wood. All right, now that we've covered the structure of the cabinets, we get to do the fun stuff, which is the exterior. This is about maybe like 20% of the work, but 80% of the visual effect, because it's the part you see all the time. So I went with, this is a 5-piece shaker front. You can see on the back here where I ripped out that channel on my exterior strips, and then there's a center piece that fits in there that makes up the majority of the face. So for these, again, dealing with that idea of there's going to be variation in these strips. Even, I mean, this is only 3/8, you hit that with the 80 grit sandpaper, it's going to change the profile of that. So to keep things as uniform as possible, I started from the outside and worked my way in. But even if there is any variation in there, all the outsides are the correct size. All that variation is on the inside where you won't see it. And then my centerpiece is custom fitted to that frame. Since these are so slim, what I did is you can see here, I used the screws for the handle to mount the drawer front itself. It just removes a step, and I don't have the depth on here to then put an additional screw in. As far as the visual effect on here, I went side grain. I'm going to do that for all of my drawer fronts, all of my door fronts. I just like that look better. And to get this pattern on here, it's the same that I did for the cabinet parts that are exterior. I did a two-tone spray paint on there, but prior to sanding, it's just cheap, you know, quarter-inch plywood from Home Depot. So that paint sets into all of the divots and cracks, places where the grain is recessed a little bit more, and then did all my sanding. And the result is you have that darker color in all of the grains, all of the imperfections. Somehow, but it makes them stand out more. But then it creates this really cool visual effect. One of the first things I've got to do on mounting these fronts is go through and make sure that all of my drawer box fronts are flush with, or at least even with each other, and even with this front plane here, so that when that front is mounted onto the box, it'll be flush all the way around. But then I also don't want it to be sitting too far back into the cabinet. Otherwise, I won't be able to reset that soft close mechanism if it gets tripped while the box is out. You need to be able to click the box all the way back in to reset that mechanism. So for this particular stack of drawers, because I've got the hamper going in the bottom and that's going to have hinges, I don't have a whole lot of adjustment in those hinges, and I'd rather not have to fiddle around with it any more than I need to. So for this stack, I'm going to start at the bottom, mark out where I want that hamper door to sit, and then get that set first, so that when I go to install my drawer fronts after that, those will be pretty straightforward because I'll be drilling those holes for the handle from the outside. So I'll be able to see exactly where that drawer front is going to lay out when it's installed. So I'll work from the bottom and work my way up. And if I need to, I'll come back and adjust those drawers to make that reveal even all the way across. As far as matching reveals for all of the other surfaces on the cabinet, you'll notice the areas to the left and right of this particular stack of drawers are going to have doors, and at the top of those doors there's a cross piece that isn't in between, that isn't in the drawer stack. So that means that those doors are going to have to be designed to overlay that cross piece so that the top of the doors match up with the level of the drawer that's in that same plane. Had to do the same thing with the hamper door at the bottom. It's overlaid almost completely over that cross member in between, and that'll just mean that once all the doors and drawers are on, all of my seams will match. One thing I might do after I put it together is come back and actually add in really thin cross members along those seams for in between the doors and in between each of the drawers. The reason they have those in kitchens is it keeps the cooking smell and all of that. In this case, would be to keep dust out of, from getting into where I'm storing my clean clothes and all of that. So we'll see how these work, but if need be, I can always come back in and add a little cross piece just to keep anything from getting into that drawer or into the interior of the cabinet.